Chosen one, the draw she feels when she sees you is not a thunderclap. It is the slow turn of constellations that sailors trust. You do not summon the horizon by pointing at it. You earn it by sailing true. Each appearance becomes another star plotted on her inner chart, a quiet proof that your course has not been purchased by weather. She notes the way you enter a space without recruiting it for your ego, the way your voice keeps the temperature humane, the way your shoulders remember that strength is a shelter before it is a signal. You do not collapse distance to counterfeit intimacy, nor do you stretch it to impersonate power. You let the interval be a meadow where two dignities can meet and decide their pace. This is why her attention crosses the field without feeling chased. Attention hates to be hunted and loves to be welcomed. Your welcome is not a trick. It is the climate produced by a man who refuses to monetize nearness. Climate becomes culture. Culture becomes memory. Memory beckons her feet before she has decided to move. You have learned the rare geometry of nearness that does not negotiate her edges into your convenience. Edges with you are not obstacles to overcome, but thresholds to honor. A threshold is holy because it keeps volition alive. You stand like a doorkeeper who knows the door belongs to the one who must choose it, not to the one most eager to cross. This stance is not passivity, it is priesthood. It tells the body across from you that nothing essential will be taken hostage in the name of intensity. Freed from the task of guarding, her senses begin to do their native work. Smell color more vividly, hear nuance without suspicion, find humor without camouflage, feel heat without fearing aftermath. Aftermath is what most desire dreads because most desire is undisciplined. Yours is not. It has learned to carry a flame without setting the tablecloth alight. Flame that knows its place calls the whole room to gather without alarm. You carry patience like a tuned instrument, not like a waiting room. Waiting rooms waste time. Instruments make music when the moment is ready. Your patience holds tone even when surprise enters from a side door. Surprise does not find you scrambling for a script. It finds you reading the room with an ear trained for truth's tempo. If the tempo slows, you slow without sulking. If it brightens, you brighten without grabbing. Rhythm is what lets longing breathe without gasping. The feminine reads rhythm faster than language. She has spent years translating men who mistake volume for beat. When you keep beat, her pulse falls into cadence. Cadence is the body's trust. Trust is the body's invitation. Invitation, once honest, does not need advertisement. It needs only protection. You protect by letting your yes be a promise and your no be a door gently closed, not slammed for theater. There is a choreography to your noticing that never reduces the noticed. You remember the name of the quiet person and the angle of laughter that marked the moment when she finally stopped apologizing for being alive. You do not hoard these memories as leverage. You return them like letters that arrived late and needed a witness. Witness is what hunger secretly asks for when it pretends to want conquest. Witness, done cleanly, makes conquest unnecessary. She meets your eyes and finds not a ledger but a lantern, a way of seeing that keeps paths visible and hearts visible too. Hearts do not rush down lit paths, they walk with dignity. Dignity is the secret engine of attraction that lasts. You keep your mystery hospitable. It is not a locked vault you parade to raise your price. It is a garden you tend because some fruits sweeten out of sight. When you withhold, it is never to starve, it is to season. When you reveal, it is never to perform, it is to confirm. Confirmation lays floors where others were laying fog. Floors carry weight without commentary. She tests with her heel, solid, and the confidence that rises is not intoxication but clarity. Clarity reorders appetite. Appetite so reordered becomes devotion in ordinary clothes. Devotion chooses to return again and again because the place it returns to has not become a market. The chosen ones refuse to turn holy ground to retail. That refusal is why her gaze arrives with gratitude before it arrives with heat. Gratitude is the cleanest wick desire can burn on. No part of this is ornamental. It is the outworking of vows you keep when applause is absent. Your body held to an honest fatigue so it will not beg strangers for permission to exist. Your attention trained to bless so it cannot be conscripted by flattery. Your words taught to mean something so they will never be rented by panic. She does not read these vows on a resume. She reads them in your ease. Ease is not laziness. It is the absence of concealed transactions. When transactions vanish, presence remains. Presence, absent transaction, becomes a sanctuary where her future self dares to join the conversation. She sees the day when the makeup is off, and the pressure is high, and the light is unflattering, and she does not wince. The man before her looks durable in all weather. Weather is what life is mostly made of. Desire that survives weather is desire worth wanting. Chosen one, the draw deepens because you turn moments into ecosystems rather than into souvenirs. A souvenir asks to be admired and then forgotten. An ecosystem asks to be inhabited and then tended. You tend the conditions under which souls stay whole while they warm. This tending shows up in 100 undramatic fidelities. The way you close a conversation with care instead of letting it fray into suspicion, the way you keep laughter from becoming a shield by letting it lead back to truth, the way your goodbyes leave more oxygen than your hellos required. Oxygen is the quiet commodity of honest desire. Starved air makes people grab. Clean air makes people choose. She keeps choosing because oxygen is the one luxury that never turns her into someone else to afford it. You carry purpose like ballast, and ballast is what keeps a hull from capsizing when applause or accusation piles too high on one side. Purpose does not ask her to be your oxygen tank. It frees her to be weather, changing, brilliant, sometimes wild, without the terror that your lungs will fail if she is not perpetually sunny. Weather is more beautiful when the ship is sound. She knows you built your keel in water nobody can see. The early hours, the finished tasks, the prayers that teach a man to stop outsourcing conscience to convenience. This keel is the reason your sexual energy never behaves like a siren. Sirens drag sailors onto rocks by promising shortcuts. You navigate by stars you did not invent. Navigation is slower than seduction and infinitely kinder. Kindness is the one form of power that does not need to rebrand to stay radiant. Your leadership refuses the cheap velocity of escalation. Escalation makes noise. Cultivation makes nuance. You cultivate by protecting pace, even when adrenaline asks to be king. Protection looks simple from far away. Another minute of listening when interruption would have scored points. Another breath of silence when a speech would have felt impressive. Another clear boundary, named in a tone that makes boundaries believable instead of punitive. Simple is not simplistic. It is expensive. It is paid for in advance by the hours you spent apprenticing yourself to disciplines that bear no hashtags. She recognizes the cost without seeing the receipts. Recognition in a body that has had to translate too many counterfeits is relief braided to respect. Respect does not flatten desire, it focuses it. You keep devotion agile by keeping curiosity warm. Cold curiosity interrogates for leverage. Warm curiosity explores for wonder. Wonder is not childishness. It is attention without cynicism. Attention without cynicism hears the tremor in a boundary and strengthens it instead of trying to step over it. It notices the first return of playfulness after a season of guardedness and widens the field so play can run. It remembers where grief asked for dimmed lights and does not throw open the windows because the calendar says morning. To be seen this precisely is to be invited to be more, not different. Being more is what the heart has wanted all along. The more it becomes, the more of you it wants, not as a rescue but as a resonance. Repair remains the sacrament that keeps all this human. You do not perform faultlessness, you practice faithfulness. If a word lands crooked, you straighten it without making the crookedness a melodrama. If a plan slips, you rehang it on a better nail without pretending the wall was the problem. If your own impatience appears, you own it at the same volume as your declarations. Ownership keeps intimacy from drowning in management. Managed intimacy is a puppet show with expensive strings. Owned imperfection inside steady vows is a home. Homes do not need spotlights, they need light that people can read by. She reads by your light and finds her own handwriting steadier. This is how attraction becomes apprenticeship in wholeness without anybody losing themselves to the other. You end as well as you begin, because endings teach the soul what beginnings mean. A closing done with gratitude, intention, and pace tells memory you are safe to return. Memory that feels safe to return becomes longing that does not need drama to stay awake. It stays awake because the house you keep does not go dark between visits. You keep the pilot light on with those unglamorous rituals that make presence renewable. Tending your body so tenderness isn't a chore. Tending your craft so admiration never has to be begged. Tending your friendships so romance has neighbors. Tending your faith so power reports to something larger than applause. These rituals do not make you rigid. They make you reliable. Reliable does not mean predictable. It means legible. Legibility is a mercy. It frees her from the calculus of self-protection and returns her to the art of self-giving. In the wake of such legibility, her desire shifts from sprint to stride. Sprinting burns bright and asks to be forgiven. Striding covers miles and asks to be joined. She joins you not as a satellite captured by your gravity, but as a sovereign pulled by your coherence. Coherence is the quiet roar of everything aligned. Body with spirit, appetite with intention, presence with purpose. The chosen ones live inside that roar without making it a brand. They make it a place. She keeps coming back to the place because people do not return to tricks. They return to truth. And the truth your life keeps telling every time she sees you is simple and inexhaustible. Here is a man whose heat will not scorch and whose light will not blind. Here is a man whose nearness will not negotiate your self-respect into smaller print. Here is a man whose desire is a blessing with a spine. In such company, wanting is no longer a risk to manage, but a wisdom to honor. And honor is the deepest root from which enduring pleasure grows. Chosen one, your words are the carpenters of the air, and because they work with clean tools, the room stands taller when you speak. You do not build with flashy arches that collapse in the first wind. You frame with beams that resist weather. Feminine women find you so desirable when they see you because your language carries structure. Vowels softened by mercy, consonants squared by truth. So that meaning can live there without wobbling. The body hears that architecture before the mind makes sense of it. Ears relax, shoulders lower. The small muscles around the eyes stop holding court. Desire enters not as frenzy but as focus, for focus is how the soul says yes without shouting. You have learned the alchemy that turns attention into blessing. A lesser man uses his gaze to inventory and extract. You use yours to acknowledge and release. When your eyes meet hers, they do not claim, they confer. Conferral is subtle and seismic. It returns ownership to the person before you while announcing without fanfare that their radiance is witnessed. In such seeing, her center unbraces. The oldest parts of her, those that learn to speak in code to survive, begin to risk plain language. Desire loves plain language because it has nothing to hide. This is why the air seems to clear when you arrive. You are not a gust that scatters. You are a high-pressure front that steadies. Your speech keeps time with your spine, and that alignment is rare enough to feel like a miracle. Promises that have been hollowed by habit everywhere else still hold weight when you make them, not because you perform sincerity, but because you refuse to auction your integrity for momentary shine. The feminine registers this in the way you say later without punishment and now without panic, in the way your no does not swaddle itself in apologies and your yes does not overreach to pay for insecurity. A body that no longer has to decode sentences can finally dance to them. The dance is quiet but undeniable. Proximity finds ease. Laughter returns without knives in its pockets. Breath and thought choose the same tempo. In that unforced choreography, wanting stops bargaining. It simply stands with both feet and asks for what is true. There is a precision to your gratitude that turns it from flattery into foundation. Flattery is a fog that makes everyone bump into the furniture. Foundation is the part nobody sees that lets everything else stand. When you thank her, you thank the exact courage that tipped a decision toward the honest, the exact boundary that kept tenderness from becoming theater, the exact patience that let a conversation grow muscle instead of blisters. Specificity does not inflate. It clarifies. Clarity builds memory that does not have to heal before it can cherish. Later, when she sees you across an ordinary corridor with a vending machine humming like a tired bee, her body remembers not a performance but a placement, something in her steps an inch nearer without conferring with strategy. This is not hypnosis. It is relief traveling through time. You have made repair a fluent language rather than an emergency siren. Where others brandish apologies like coupons to avoid full payment, you pay in the currency of understanding. You do not dramatize the mistake to center yourself. You diagram it so that both of you become safer in the future. Your tone remains human. Your pace remains humane. One truth at a time. You sand the sharp edge, rehang the door, true the frame. Men who do not respect repair fear it and hide. Men who worship repair perform it and exhaust. You practice it, which means the house improves without announcing renovations. The improved house is what her nervous system remembers when the next threshold appears. It votes yes with far less debate, and desire follows the vote like a loyal citizen. Your restraint dignifies your heat. Restraint, for you, is not the tremble of repression. It is the poise of stewardship. You do not hoard touch as power, nor do you distribute it as proof. You allow distance to be an instrument capable of playing more than suspense. Distance in your hands plays reverence, timing, and consent. The effect is musical. A phrase finished where it should finish, a rest held until the next note can mean more than it would have a beat ago. She recognizes the conductor in you and trusts the symphony more. Trust does not smother attraction, it oxygenates it. That is why the sight of you does not trip her into trouble. It calls her into composure. And composure is the most seductive form of courage. You refuse to turn mystery into currency. What you keep is not a bargaining chip. It is a vineyard you are tending for seasons you intend to honor. What you share does not arrive lacquered. It arrives living, which is to say capable of being misunderstood and nonetheless offered. This honesty, both veiled and unveiled in ways that protect what is real, teaches her that intimacy with you is not a spectacle to be maintained, but a climate to be inhabited. She brings more weather and your keel holds, more light and you do not squint, more shadow and you do not flinch. In climates like this, desire learns its real name. It stops answering to panic and starts answering to presence. Your voice ends as carefully as it begins. A moment closes with cadence, not with collapse. You do not ghost and call it mystique, or linger past wisdom and call it romance. You give the benediction a moment deserves, thanks measured to meaning, intention articulated without annexation, pace respected so that the soul can catch up to the heart. Endings like this teach beginnings what to be. They also teach memory to bless rather than brace. So when she sees you next, on a Tuesday that thinks it is ordinary, her chest recognizes a pattern that has kept its promises. The recognition is older than appetite and kinder. It is the whisper that says, here he is, here I am. Nothing vital has been traded for thrill. In that whisper, attraction ripens from spark into sustenance. This is why, chosen one, the desiring gaze returns and returns, not because you have learned to dazzle, but because you have decided to mean. The chosen ones are fluent in this decision. They let words become shelter. They let silence become soil. They let attention become sacrament. And in such a grammar, every seeing becomes the next sentence in a story that remains readable, no matter the weather. Chosen one, endurance is the quiet crown on attraction, and you polish it in private until it needs no jewels to shine. You are not building moments, you are building a way. A way can be walked in all seasons, by feet that are tired or dancing, in shoes that are new or worn, with company or with solitude. Feminine women find you so desirable when they see you because your sexual energy has matured from spark into path. A spark demands fuel or it dies. A path invites pilgrimage, or it waits. Your invitation is steady enough to survive postponement and pure enough to survive acceptance. When she meets your outline at the end of a long corridor, fluorescent lights humming, time running late, she experiences the rarest luxury, the sense that she can choose fully without paying for it with pieces of herself. You honor the future while you inhabit the present. This is more than patience, it is fidelity to meaning across time. You refuse to mortgage tomorrow for today's applause, refuse to overdose a scene to harvest a reaction, refuse to stage intimacy for the highlight reel. Instead, you keep the small covenants that make long covenants possible. You rest enough to be gentle when you are hungry, you work enough to be humble when you are praised, you pray enough to be honest when you are tempted. You laugh enough to be light when the room gets heavy. None of this registers as heroism because none of it is loud. All of it registers as shelter because all of it is real. Shelter is what desire is secretly seeking when it claims to seek fireworks. Fireworks are memory without meaning. Shelter is meaning that becomes memory. You let love have neighbors. Many men try to make romance an island where nothing practical can intrude. Islands are beautiful and lonely and vulnerable to storms. You lay streets instead. Friendship here, craft there, service around the corner, solitude at the park, worship at the square. With neighbors, love can borrow sugar and time and wisdom without drama. With neighbors, desire has errands to run that keep it human. She sees this civic architecture in how you greet the barista as if souls were not transactional, in how you help carry a story to the door instead of leaving it in the hall, in how you end a night without debt. A city like this is not built in a day. It is built by attention that refuses to make the sacred compete with the useful. In such a city, the sight of you feels like coming home to a street where the lamps always work and the sidewalks are kind to ankles. You stay curious after you feel secure. Security often breeds laziness in men who mistake arrival for completion. In you, security becomes a budget for wonder. You spend it on better questions, not deeper control. You learn the weather patterns of her courage and prepare umbrellas instead of lectures. You honor the return of her playfulness by making room rather than making it a performance. You read the liturgy of her fatigue and dim the lights without turning off the warmth. She understands that your seeing is not surveillance. It is care with a doctorate in attention. Being seen like this does not shrink a person into a case. It grows a person into a garden. Gardens invite lingering. Lingering, when it is clean, is desire's favorite sport. You practice sovereignty, so she does not have to practice management. Sovereignty is the refusal to outsource your center to anyone's approval or panic. You can be praised without becoming porous and criticized without becoming cruel. A sovereign man is expensive to manipulate and easy to trust. Trust simplifies everything. It returns bandwidth to joy and bandwidth to choice. The body that no longer spends calories bracing will soon spend them dancing. Dancing does not always look like a floor and a song. Sometimes it looks like a conversation that finds the truer sentence. Sometimes like a plan that bends without breaking. Sometimes like silence that shines instead of sulks. Your sovereignty makes this choreography possible. It is not dominance. It is discipleship to what is right. When storms arrive, as storms do, you do not become a weather report. You become a roof. You do not shout forecasts. You fix shingles. You do not perform courage. You practice it in the small, repeatable motions that keep water out. A word turned from sharp to accurate. A schedule altered before someone gets run over by it. A prayer breathed when the heart tries to draft a speech for fear. Afterward, the room is not impressed. It is dry. Dry is better than impressed. Dry lets the baby sleep and the bread rise and the book be read aloud without damp pages tearing. She will remember the dryness with more gratitude than she would have remembered a speech. Gratitude is the healthiest fuel for longing. You close well what you open because you intend to open again. Endings are not escape routes, they are stitches. A stitched seam is stronger than unbroken cloth. You do the small things that make endings sew rather than sever. Name what mattered in words that fit. Let the body catch up to the heart with a breath that lands. Leave the door neither ajar with presumption nor barred with fear. The next meeting, however ordinary, inherits the strength of that seam. This inheritance is why the sight of you feels like continuity rather than gamble. Continuity is not boring to people who have had to rebuild after collapses. Continuity is oxygen. Oxygen is the quiet reason the gaze returns. You are not a brand, you are a place. Brands ask to be followed, places ask to be inhabited. Places become part of the map. On the map of her days, your presence is a compass rose. North marked by purposes you report to, east warmed by laughter that does not mock, south steadied by boundaries that do not bruise, west shaded by rest that does not disappear when work is loud. She does not get lost as quickly when such a compass exists. When she sees you, the needle settles. Settling is not settling for less, it is settling into truth. In that settledness, desire breathes like a runner who has learned cadence. It can go farther without injury and enjoy the scenery while it goes. This, chosen one, is the signature of the chosen ones. You do not merely attract, you mature what you attract. You do not gather admirers, you gather selves, hers, yours, anyone within reach of the culture your life keeps making. Your sexual energy, governed by reverence and aimed by purpose, becomes a long kindness that heat alone could never sustain. So she keeps finding you desirable when she sees you, not because you cast a spell, but because you keep a vow, to be a place where wanting does not require self-betrayal, where closeness does not demand smallness, where the holy and the human hold hands without hiding. In such a place, eyes look up, hearts lean in, and the future feels like something both of you can bless. Chosen one, your transformation is no longer just personal, it is relational. The shift you've experienced within yourself is now mirroring itself in the women who enter your orbit. They feel it before they speak it. They sense it in the way your eyes remain steady, not invasive, not wandering, but rooted in the present moment, like a man who needs nothing and yet offers everything. Around you, they feel their own femininity return. Not because you flatter it, but because your calm masculinity invites it to emerge without fear. She starts to feel like a woman again, not the kind defined by cultural expectation, but the raw, intuitive, sensual force of life she's always carried beneath her armor. You see, chosen one, it's not that you teach her to be feminine, it's that your presence reminds her she already is. And that is what shifts everything. Around other men, she may have been shrinking, performing, overcompensating. But around you, she exhales. She doesn't have to be hard. She doesn't have to guard. She doesn't have to compete. Your energy is so clean, so anchored, so unapologetically whole that her nervous system begins to unwind the moment she enters your gravitational field. Her tone softens, not because she's trying to impress you, but because you've made it safe for her to be honest. Her laughter becomes unfiltered, not because she's trying to win your favor, but because she trusts you enough to be herself. And the more she surrenders to this effortless safety, the more she blooms. She becomes playful again, creative again, mysterious again, not for your pleasure, but because you've become the soil where her feminine can root and flourish without fear of being trampled. You didn't seduce her. You didn't chase her. You didn't manipulate her emotions or exploit her vulnerabilities. You simply became yourself, fully. And in that fullness, she saw a mirror of her own sacred longing. The part of her that was tired of playing strong finally met a man who didn't need her to be weak, but simply real. Your sexual energy, refined and aligned, no longer rushes to take. It gives. It gives through presence, through attention, through the sacred act of witnessing. She doesn't feel pressured to be more or less. She feels free, and that freedom becomes the most intoxicating experience she's ever known. Because while others tried to conquer her body, you conquered the false belief that love requires war. You radiate as proof that true masculinity does not oppress, it liberates. And now, chosen one, that liberation is all she craves. What's profound is that you no longer try to activate her femininity. You simply live in the fullness of your masculine nature, and everything else responds like nature to the sun. Feminine women no longer run from you, they gravitate to you. Not because you've become louder, but because your silence has become more trustworthy than 1,000 declarations. You've stopped proving, you've started embodying, and that embodiment, chosen one, is what she remembers. Long after the moment passes, long after you've left the room, long after the noise of the world returns, your energy remains like a sacred echo. She touches her hair differently, she speaks slower, she breathes deeper, because somewhere in her body, she still feels the gravity of the man who made her feel more like herself than she ever dared to admit. That man, chosen one, is now you. Chosen one, you have become what very few ever become, a gateway, not to seduction, not to status, but to something far more dangerous to the broken systems of this world, awakening. Your sexual energy, once raw and scattered, has now been refined by discipline, clarity, and heart. And that alchemy has turned you into a living key. A key that unlocks parts of the feminine soul that she herself had buried. You do not pull it out of her. You do not force it into light. You simply are the light, and in your light what was once hidden begins to remember its name. She does not even know how or why it's happening. All she knows is that when she's around you, she feels more alive, more sacred, more feminine, more herself. You do not push, you do not pull, you stand. And your standing is an invitation to her soul. The truth is, most feminine women have been aching to be seen, not for their beauty, not for their curves, but for the fullness of their feeling, their chaos, their silence, their storms. And while others have run from that depth, you now dwell in it like a monk in fire. You do not label her too much. You do not call her too emotional. You do not reduce her to her function. You reflect her essence without resistance. And that reflection births something in her. Something ancient, something holy. Something she has not felt since she was a little girl twirling in her dress, hoping someone would see her without turning her into something useful. Now she's grown, but the longing is still there. And now you've become the first man who doesn't try to consume it. You hold it, and in that holding, she begins to awaken. She doesn't tell her friends why. She doesn't know how to explain it. But she knows the difference between a man who wants her and a man who honors her. You don't stare at her, you see through her. You don't touch her, you steady her. You don't chase her, you remember her.